Welcome to Breathe In, Scream Out, a podcast for feeling it all, one breath and scream at a time. I'm Katie Healy, your guide through this sacred mess called life. Here in this podcast, we'll feel everything. We'll cry, we'll laugh, we'll scream, and maybe scream again. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Breathe In, Scream Out. I am your host, Katie Healy. I'm a breathwork and embodiment facilitator and an astrologer, and I am so excited to share this podcast with you and this first episode. This podcast is a space for connection and catharsis. We'll talk about growth, grief, the moon, and everything in between. We'll cry, we'll laugh, we'll scream, and we will feel everything. So let's get into it. Whether you follow my work as a teacher, facilitator, guide, astrologer, actor, creator or not, this podcast has been something that has been in the works for quite some time. So if you're wondering why now, it's because I got sick of myself and my excuses about delaying it, about another white woman with a podcast, which we know there are plenty of us, and probably just my own learnings, my own trials and tribulations, my own desire to express and share everything I've learned and continue to learn, both in the wellness space, in the creative space, and just as a human being in 2025. This podcast will be a mix of both solo episodes and interviews, conversations with people, not just in the wellness space, but entrepreneurs, artists, humans that I admire, that inspire me, that are also communicators, sharers, people that believe in our ability to connect and give back, and the importance of feeling our feelings. People that are not afraid to get in the muck, in the mess, this sacred mess that we call life. Let's start out today with my first solo episode here. And the solo episodes will be dedicated to the cycles of the moon. And there are so many incredible aspects of astrology. But 2025 is no joke, as we all know. No matter where you live, who you are, where you come from, we are being put through the ringer. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Our outer planets, 4 out of 5 of those planets that are some of the slowest moving planets, are changing. So we're feeling a collective shift on a massive level. It's change or bust. But I want to focus on the moon because sun sign gets a lot of play, and it also gets a lot of flack. I think it's a lot of the reason why we don't fully understand astrology and the way it can connect us to other people, the way it can inspire us, inform us, and most importantly, hold us accountable. Astrology is meant to be experienced, not just talked about and studied. We have to go out there and be in relationship to people, most importantly, our environment, energies. So I want to focus on the moon because the moon is how and where we receive nourishment, our emotional life, how we tend to and take care of ourselves. And again, I want to, like so many of amazing astrologers that are in the ether, in these spaces, holding their own podcasts, sharing their own work, are talking about. There's this big misconception about astrology that it's meant to act as a crutch or an excuse for bad behavior. And it certainly can be when put in the wrong hands. But it is also an opportunity to really not just understand ourselves, which is important, but have the space and capacity to understand other people. And even more importantly than any of that, hold ourselves and other people accountable as well. There is no growth, there is no change without accountability. There is also no perfection, but we'll get into that at another time. But I wanted to start this first episode with very timely. For those of you who don't know, even though I scream it from the rooftops 90% of the time, I am a Sag Sun, Gemini rising, Capricorn moon, Sag Mercury, Aries Mars, Scorpio Venus. Those are just my big 6. But this first episode is being released just in time for Gemini season. And I, like I said earlier, got sick of my own shit and decided to finally make the leap, the jump to create this podcast with the support and encouragement and demands of many of my students, colleagues, friends, the most incredible people I know. So here I am, and of course, I wanted to take things slow and not give into my intense, chaotic nature. And here we have it. I am releasing it during Gemini season, my rising sign, how I shine and show up in the world, what I'm growing towards, with a Sag full moon coming up, who I am, my identity. So it felt really timely to push myself to just get it out there. Done is better than perfect. And that's what this is going to be about today. We're going to focus on this upcoming Gemini season and the cycles of the moon. So just at a baseline, if you know this information, thank you for listening again. But whenever we enter a new season, like Gemini season, which will start here at the end of May, the new moon is aligned with the sun sign we are under. So there will be a Gemini new moon on Monday, May 26th, 2025. And the full moon is its opposite sign, its sibling sign, which happens to be Sag. So if you're wondering why I have so much dichotomy, I am both. My sun and rising are opposite, but opposites attract, they balance each other, they play off of each other. So our full moon will be in Sagittarius on Wednesday, June 11th, 2025. New moons at a very simple level are amazing times, traditionally, to start something new, new beginnings, new habits, beliefs, new identities for ourselves, especially during Gemini season. And full moons are traditionally a time to release, let go of, make space for, excavate what remains hidden. And again, I'm talking in really broad terms here. Sometimes when there's eclipses or other parts of astrology, we want to be mindful of that. But I think at a high level, when we're talking about these general terms, new moon, full moon, Gemini, Sag, there's always so much minutia and uniqueness about every season year to year. No two seasons are the same. No Gemini season is the same year after year. There's so many things at play. But as we start to just jump into this podcast here, and as my goal to not only make astrology more accessible, but also make it more relatable in terms to how we feel and our ability to experience things, we're going to start with these new moon, full moon, general ideas here, and I'll pepper in some specifics for the season. So Gemini is the twins. Gemini is duality. Gemini is the first air sign out of our 12 signs. In astrology, the first sign is Aries. So the start of the astrological new year, which I have always subscribed to, even in my non-astrological being state, where I still was fighting against it and went to Catholic school for 100 years and was always told it was fake and not real. I always felt like March was the start of my year. Like it really took 3 months for me to get going, and society wants Jan 1, we're out the door, new habits, new ways of being. And I think especially last year and this year, we've all collectively started to be like, whoa, hold on, wait a minute, I don't subscribe to that. And if you're hesitant to jump into the astrological calendar, just think about the seasons. Spring is new birth, the flowers are blossoming, the trees are coming to life again. The temperature is changing. The sun is coming back out. And when you think about winter, Jan 1, death. Like we are in the cold. I love the cold, so we could talk about that later. But even if you just think about the cycles of the seasons, starting the year with spring, with Aries season, the first sign of the zodiac, that's where we begin. We begin with fire. We move into Taurus. Then we move into Earth. And then Gemini, air. And Gemini is ruled by Mercury, the planet of communication. It's our first air sign. So heavily focused on curiosity, adventure. It's ripe with possibility and our desire to make change. We're ready. Gemini is also a mutable sign. It's air and it's mutable. And we'll spend another episode really digging into those things, those different modalities. But it's mutable, which means it kind of falls between the two seasons. It's not quite summer. It's not quite spring. Somewhere in between. Spring comes before summer, but you'll let that slide. And it's the end of May through the middle of June. So depending on what part of the world you live in, what part of the country, global warming, we are experiencing these aspects of life in a very different way. And Gemini is our first foyer, our first introduction in the astrological setup, makeup, the third sign, the third house, communication. And it is our first taste of the in-between, not quite one thing, not quite the other, and this duality. And it is, again, a lot of curiosity, perspective, mindset shifts. And I love quotes. I use them often. And a quote I found that I felt really encapsulated what we'll talk about with this Gemini new moon here on May 26th is from Marina Abramovich. The most revolutionary ideas are not sellable, but only mind-changing. And when we think about a new moon, the newness, the new things we want to start, we think about mindset. We think about our perspectives. We ask this question in any Gemini season, any Gemini energy, what perspectives am I ready to shift, to change, to adjust? That saying, rejection is redirection, that is the Gemini mindset. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. It's not a matter of if it will happen, it's when it will happen. And a Gemini new moon is an opportunity here to really ask yourself to think about, what do I want to change? What mindsets, beliefs, habits are either supporting the direction I want to go in or holding me back from where I need to be? And since it is Gemini season, sometimes folks think, just 2 or 3 days before or after a new moon is really when we're playing with this energy. But the beautiful thing about astrology, and again, astrology is meant to be experienced. We have the opportunity for all of Gemini season to play with these aspects of self. And you might be saying, I'm not a Gemini. I'm not a Gemini sun, rising, moon. I have no planets in Gemini. Okay, that's possible. But there is still a part of your chart that is ruled by Gemini. There are Geminis in your life. Communication, hello. Gemini rules social media. Gemini rules curiosity, learning, understanding. And now more than ever, again, no matter where you live, I live in the United States of America, Jersey forever. I'm a Jersey girl, but now more than ever, being able to communicate, express, understand, be curious, and not dogmatic, which is the darker tone of Sag. We'll get into that. But our ability to stay curious, to be willing to communicate even when it is uncomfortable, to be open-minded is so important with all the misunderstanding, misinformation, me versus them, us versus them. It is really important to constantly tap into these aspects of self. Where can I be more curious? Where am I being too close-minded? Not just with other people, also with yourself. A great ritual for the Gemini new moon, I think, would be to ask yourself, what are my top 5 beliefs? Positive or negative, quote unquote. I really don't love those terms, good or bad, right or wrong, positive or negative. But let's say, what are the beliefs that I have? A few that are helpful and harmful. We all have them. We all, even if we've worked really hard on them, maybe find ourselves slipping back into the not enoughness, not good enough, not enough, whatever it is. You know when I say it, what it is. You feel it in your body. And a ritual for the Gemini new moon could be to write out those beliefs, a mindset, a limiting belief you have, a limiting mindset you have, and how can you restructure that belief to be totally different, to be totally supportive of the direction you're going in. And maybe it's a belief that's already supportive. How can you integrate it more into your life? It's so important and such a gift of Gemini to embrace this duality. And since it is Gemini season, we could sit here all day, and I know Gemini is one of the more quote unquote controversial signs of the zodiac. There are some wild Geminis. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. a quick Google search will tell you exactly what a Gemini sun looks like, right? But there's so many incredible artists, wordsmiths, creators that are Geminis. And there's this idea that the duality, the two-facedness of Gemini, sure, every sign is light and dark. Every human being has lightness and darkness. And like I said in this podcast, we're embracing all of it, not just the stuff that feels good on the surface or satisfying or that keeps us in our comfort zone. So sure, Gemini, maybe in its darker tones, can be manipulative, can disassociate, can rely too much on the thinking aspect of self, on the analysis paralysis, on the let me think my way out of it instead of figuring out what direction I want to go. For this Gemini new moon, starting off Gemini season, carrying this energy of, if you're curious, what part of my mindset do I need to strengthen? Do I need to overhaul and change altogether? Lord knows there are a few aspects that I deal with, that the imposter syndrome, body issues, my sense of self, these things where even this podcast, where I needed more of a growth mindset, right? Where we hold ourselves back. So the idea that it doesn't need to constantly be sellable or perfect or ready to go off the jump. How can you change your own life just by changing your mindset? Even this idea of, if you're struggling with a change, a new habit, a new way of being, a part of yourself that you find yourself coming up against, a goal, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I said that once before, but that just feels so important to the lightness of a Gemini mindset. What do you want to change? Where do you want to grow? And like I said, there is a part of Gemini, the darker tones, that can disassociate, that can rely on the analysis, which is a beautiful part of the brain. Our brain is, I'm going to say this now and many times because I know the thinker people who think they are thinkers over feelers and that thinking is more important than feeling are going to come for me, and I welcome it. But brain is a beautiful thing. Thought is a beautiful thing. I am a Gemini rising. I am curious as fuck all the time. I drove my parents crazy, asking why, wondering why. I was, and still can be, if you don't like to be questioned, a bit of a pain in the ass, right? So our ability to be curious and rely on our brain and our thinking and our desire to learn, Gemini is this eternal student, is so powerful. But if we can't take that into our body, if we can't process our feeling, our thought, our curiosity also through our body, that's where we start to maybe get into the darker tones of Gemini, or the shadow side, however you feel or refer to it. That part of you that only wants to think your way out of a thing. And, the news is, maybe you've heard it, feelings were meant to be felt, okay? And the longer we cling to them, bury them down, attach to them, the harder it is to get rid of them. The more it will cast a shadow on who we're trying to be. And Gemini, like I've said a few times now, is all about communication, sharing, knowledge, ideas. It is also connected to our lungs, our breath. Gemini rules the breath. Why is that? Obviously communication, it's how we share. It's why I run my mouth enough. Gemini rising Sag sun, why I love to talk and share and be in communion with people, communication, why I need to express. I've shared this with my therapist many times. It's almost like I have a compulsion to express. And my dad used to say, no one ever doubts how you feel, Katie. We all know, whether it's on your face or out of your mouth. And double-edged sword, but I'll take it. But Gemini is connected to our breath. If you want to get out of your head, you need to get into your body. If you want to get into your body, you have to be on your breath. When you are focusing on your breath, you want to be present. That is focusing on breath. That is focusing on person-to-person connection, person to nature, person to animal. That is being fully and completely present. There is no way to really focus on your breath, even just a simple inhale and exhale, and not have a shifted sense of presence with yourself or with other. When we have that desire to disconnect, disassociate, think our way through it when maybe we need a little bit more feeling, can you drop in and just breathe? Deep inhale, deep exhale. Can you scream? Can you cry? Can you let out the thing? And I promise we will let out a scream together. That is the whole point of this podcast. It's not just the name, but Gemini is the breath. So through this mindset work, through rejection as redirection, through shifting what needs to change, what mindsets are supporting or hurting the change, the direction that you desire, that you seek to go in. Can you focus on the breath? Can you drop in and make sure that the thinking versus feeling balance is there? Gemini new moon. Maybe that ritual is breath work. Maybe it's some sort of embodiment work. Hello, I am a breathwork and embodiment guide, facilitator, whatever you want to call me. And not to get on my soapbox, but breathwork changed my life in every way. I would like to think that if I hadn't have found it, maybe I would have ended up here, but I know I wouldn't have. For me, it was the most, and has been, one of the most transformative things of my life. Experiences, practices. It helped me metabolize so much pain and hurt and heartbreak through a lot of grief and loss, which we will absolutely get into in these podcasts. And it changed everything for me. So maybe your practice is breath work. Maybe your practice is taking those beliefs, a few supporting ones, a few harmful ones, and how can you either make them stronger, incorporate them into your life more as a daily practice, or the harmful or more painful spots, beliefs, thoughts, feelings, how do you totally rewrite that narrative? How do you not make them sellable, but allow them to change your mind? Because that is where the revolution lies. Okay. Take a deep breath in. Exhale a sigh or a sound out. Gemini. Maybe your brain is a flutter. Now, Sagittarius is Gemini's sibling sign. I am a Sag sun, as I have shared. So anytime, like I shared earlier, that there is a new moon, 2-ish weeks later, there will be a full moon. And it will be in the sibling sign that we are under. Every sign has a sibling. People used to call it sister sign. I call it sibling sign. Every sign has an opposite if that's what feels best and right for you, but it's directly across from it on the chart. So end of May, endish of May through the middle of June, lines up with the middle end of November through the middle of December. And that is Gemini and Sag. Gemini, eternal student. Sag is the philosopher. So as you can imagine, those whys from me are endless. I am persistent, to say the least. Sorry, Mom. Philosopher, Sag, is the expander. Sag is fire. Air feeds fire when you think about it. So Gemini is air, Sagittarius is fire. Sagittarius is the expander. It's ruled by Jupiter, the planet of abundance. It's how and where we create our abundance in our life. It's how and where we create our luck. And being that this is a full moon, and full moons are a time for release, letting go, creating space, we will be focused on not the darker tones of Sag, but maybe if you want to refer to it as that. I mean, Sag is the seeker. Sag is leaps of faith, always looking for a higher meaning. And when a Sag full moon comes up, it's really about, if that's Sag energy, right? The seeker, expander, abundance, faith, luck. What's the opposite of that? Fear, repression, playing small, focusing on only the quote unquote negative outcomes or the outcomes that we don't want. The thing you focus on, that's usually what you create more of in mindset work. And a quote for the Sag full moon, my boy, Mr. Carl Jung. Any young heads up in here? In my grief work, we talk a lot about Carl Jung. I know a few of my collaborators, dear friends and loved ones will know what I'm talking about. But Mr. Carl Jung, he said, "The cave you fear to enter, there is your task." So for a Sag full moon, which will be on Wednesday, June 11th, we are working around any places where we are sacrificing our freedom, our dreams, our faith, our expansion for what is comfortable. Now, 2025, like I said, we feel everything in here. This is not a toxic positivity, beat around the bush, take the high road sort of place, okay? Fear is valid. There is a lot that is really friggin' unsettling and scary and overwhelming to the point of inaction. I know I have absolutely been in that place, even with this podcast. A lot of what's the point? Yeah. And I never want to take away from that real, very real fear, oppression that so many of us are feeling collectively and individually in our own ways. You know, I am a woman. I know what it's like to feel oppressed by men, by white men. I am not a Black woman. I am not a Latina woman. I am not gay. I am not queer. And there are so many versions of oppression and fear and anxiety that I won't understand because I do have so much of my own privilege as a white woman. So, fear is valid. Fear is real. And I am never telling you that it is not. I am never telling you to be so delusional all day, every day, 24/7 that you don't give in to your fears. Because my actual belief, my ethos, and a lot of what this podcast is about is creating the space for you to not only feel everything, but actually face the things that we have all been conditioned to shove down, turn off, run away from. Because my belief, and as one of my favorite people on the planet reminded me of this week, Miss Issa Brand, that me personally, I need to, in that moment that the fear or the pain or the upset comes up, because of, I think, so much of the work I've done, I was not always this way. Lord knows. And the longer you've known me, the longer you know this to be true. But because of my own pain and grief and deep, deep grief and loss and hurt, at this point in my life, I need to feel the thing. I need to feel the fear, the upset, the pain, the hurt right up front so that I can get to the other side and return to my Sag qualities of faith, of abundance, of seeking and understanding that there is also something greater on the other side of my fear. And normally, the bigger the fear, the more work that I can do for me personally. So your fears are valid. And if you're not in a place where you can fully live outside of them, you don't. But for this full moon, a time of release, what can you do? Ritual, practice, embodied work, breath work, meditation, yoga, Reiki, whatever works for you. How can you, again, the moon, nourish yourself to get maybe even terrifyingly real about what fears are okay for right now? They're not hurting you. They're maybe not helping you, but they're not hurting you. They're real. We're all feeling them. But what needs to go? What are the things keeping you complacent? What are the beliefs, thoughts, feelings, relationships that are keeping you in inaction? And again, this idea of presence. Gemini, breath, presence. Sag actually rules the legs, the thighs, movement, being able to move. Sag is the center. So like this idea of half man, half beast, whatever that means to you. But I think of like this horse, this movement, this galloping. And I've heard many times that not just me, I would not just say this about myself because I have a Sag, but Sagittarius is the gift of full presence. The gift of being able to be fully present with what is happening in that moment. This idea, the cave you fear to enter, there is your task. Where are you sacrificing your freedom, your dreams, your expansion because of fear? And only you can decide which fears are valid and true right now in this very moment. And I think most of those are the ones that are collective, for sure. There's almost feels like too much to handle, right? And yet, here we still are. Sometimes fear is our greatest motivator, right? Or anger or frustration. For me, anger and frustration is my greatest motivator. Aries, Mars, but we'll get into that another time. What can stay, what is okay, but what needs to go, what can be released? And, when I say new moon is a time for new beginnings, full moon is a time for release, letting go, it's really two sides of the same coin here. When you want to start something new, you can't invite it in if you don't have the space. And when you want to make space, let something go, you have to have some sort of vision or idea of what you really want to call in, right? Some people call it manifestation, visualization. Maybe it's just your intuition and inner knowing. But a Sag full moon really wants you to feel the fear, do it anyway, enter that cave because that is your task. And remember that there are no positives or negatives with feeling. There just is. There's only lessons. And something I'm really passionate about in all my classes and all my teachings and offerings is feelings are feelings. Humans decided, we decided, society decided to categorize them as good or bad, as right or wrong. Now, I am not saying that I am free from the complicated feelings I have about being really angry or being really vocal as a woman, How many times have I been told that my anger or my sadness or my grief are too much or inappropriate or people can't handle it? More times than I can count. And this space will not be that. So, how can you, understanding Gemini, the eternal student, Gemini season, thought, creation, connection. I had an astrologer who read my birth chart very early on and referred to my Gemini rising as being like the bee. That my Sag is on a path, that my Capricorn, the sea goat, wants to climb the, friggin' sea mountain. But my Gemini can buzz over from here to here and here and here. Didn't need to be one thing. It could embrace that duality. Embracing not just your ability to be the very different versions of yourself in the way that's supportive and true to you, to analyze, to be thoughtful about your mindset, about where you can expand and grow and have more faith. And the Sag full moon of releasing the fear that's holding you back from your dreams, from your freedom, from your expansion, and trusting that whatever's happening around you, whatever folks, as always, whatever people's opinions, ideas, experiences of you, as long as you are being true and right to you, the people that you love, the people that you support, the spaces that you show up in, there's no good or bad, no right or wrong. It's not your responsibility to manage expectations of how people see you or experience you. That's so out of alignment. When we spend too much time thinking about what other people think about us or how other people experience us. We're really taking away that ability to be present, to be thoughtful, to feel into the connections. So just a little bit about this Gemini new moon, this Sag full moon, this season, this time, this ability to not only use our big, beautiful, powerful, brilliant brains, but also to feel the feelings, have the faith, feel the fear, and trust that feeling the fear will allow you to get to the other side of it. Whether it's something you're trying to accomplish, a relationship you're trying to create, a new habit, pattern, way of being, a new version of yourself. How can you have a little bit more trust, a little bit deeper of a connection to you? That's what this Gemini Sag season means to me. This Gemini season, Gemini new moon, Sag full moon. Embrace, release. And some important aspects of this season that are coming up. Saturn is moving into Aries on May 24th, right before this new moon. And Saturn is the planet of karmic life lessons. We're moving into this season of Aries out of Pisces. So there will feel maybe totally different, since Pisces and Aries are such different energies. But when we think about this planet Saturn of karmic life lessons, this is one of those planets that I mentioned, an outer planet that moves slower than the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, that's shifting in a really big way. We're all feeling it personally and collectively, which just kind of magnifies the change. And Aries is the first, the initiator, ruled by the planet of war. I say those things and people wince or, their butt cheeks tighten. And I get it. But if we look around us, we see what's happening, and Aries is really me, the sense of self. So we'll be digging into these themes a little bit more as we move into Saturn in Aries season, but really focusing right now on how and where we could receive this nourishment, moon energy, throughout the seasons. And just because you don't have Gemini or Sag in your chart, or maybe you don't even know, doesn't mean you don't experience it every day. Saturn moves into Aries on May 24th. Later in the month, Jupiter will move out of Gemini, where it's been for the last year and change, and we'll move into Cancer. And Jupiter in Gemini, Jupiter, the planet of abundance, luck, how and where we create that for ourselves, doesn't love to be in Gemini. We call it being in detriment in astrology terms. It just really means that it's stifled. It can't be fully realized here. So, for example, I am a Gemini rising. I've said it, you know it. But about 12 years ago, because it takes 12 years to go through every single sign. Jupiter takes about roughly 12 years to make its way through the entire zodiac. Was the last time Jupiter was in Gemini. And it was the most wild, transformational, life-changing year of my life. I've had some big years since then, but it was immense. It's when I was going through acting school, when I, opened myself up to a completely new way of being, where I actually got in touch with my feeling and my emotions. It changed my life. It changed the people in my life. I started my theater company. I started a totally new chapter of my life, a new relationship at the time. It was wild. And I was not into astrology. Then I was still just, I'm a Sag, reading my sun sign, which there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. But I've obviously gotten much deeper into astrology since then. And even though Gemini doesn't feel quite right in Jupiter, I knew that going into this year. And I decided what that was going to maybe look like for me? Or just having that information helped me understand all these growth edges and pain points, even if they're for my best and highest good that I'm coming up against. Good news is Jupiter is going to move into Cancer, which we'll talk a little bit more about in the next solo episode that I release for Cancer season, Cancer new moon, Capricorn full moon. And Jupiter loves to be in Cancer. Cancer is exalted when it's in Jupiter. Jupiter is exalted when Cancer is there. So it's just more empowered. It's more generous. Cancer is nurture, mother, intuitive energy. So collectively and maybe personally, we'll also be feeling that dynamic as well. It will help us feel a little bit more secure, a little bit more sovereign. Lots of energy. Lots of invitation for this upcoming season. Depending on what you do or don't know about astrology, I hope this resonated. And not because breathwork has changed my life, but I would invite you, if you do nothing else this Gemini season, if you forget the rituals, if you forget everything I said, which is possible and okay, can you practice once a day when you remember, when you feel anxious, in your fear, in your anxiety, in your head, can you connect to your breath? A simple inhale and exhale, a circular breath, in through the nose, out through the nose, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Because that is your fastest way to presence, to feeling, to being in your body. And I, not to toot my own horn, am living, breathing proof of that. Like I said, breathwork changed my life, a very particular kind of breathwork, but during the darkest times of my life, the hardest, most heartbreaking grief, where I could really only describe it as a hole in my heart when I lost my dad and so many people thereafter, breathwork was the thing that helped me, I like to say, metabolize the pain. And it's something we'll talk more about, not just because I teach breathwork, but because it truly has worked for me. And I think anyone who has known me longer than the last 10-ish years knows that. And for me, it was the most powerful tool. Breathing is one of the only things we don't have to think about doing. We just do it. So what happens when you put your attention on it? What happens when you put intention behind it? What shifts? How do you feel more powerful, more activated, more alive in your body? And I teach a 3-part active breath that is meant for catharsis in a way, maybe a little bit more intense than some people are comfortable with, but there are so many different types. It doesn't have to be what I do. It doesn't even have to be a breath work I know. It can be that simple, in through the nose, out through the mouth. But if you do nothing else, can you take that ability to be present, to not only be in the brain, but also be in the body? That is always my biggest invitation here. And most importantly, can you express? Can you use the gift of Gemini Sag, sharing knowledge, the gift of gab? I mean, hello, I've been talking, 45 minutes here? I could go on all day. And I will spare you. I will be back with more episodes, but don't be afraid to share, to connect, especially in this world. I understand how scary that can be, but why I'm here, why I do what I do is because people drive me crazy. Being a human being is so hard, and connecting with people is still my favorite thing in the world. Do some people drive me crazy? Yeah. Do I drive myself crazy? Yeah. Maybe I'm sure there's plenty of people I drive crazy. I'll give you my mother's phone number, and you can talk all about it. But there's something to be said that when we want to shrink and when we want to crawl in a hole and disassociate, when we practice the willingness to connect with other people, not just with ourselves, with other people, there is something so cathartic and healing just in that. And when all else fails, you scream. Screaming is a way of releasing. Screaming is a way of communicating. There doesn't need to be an emotion behind it. Sometimes it just feels good to make sound. And you're probably like, it took 45 minutes for her to get to this breathe in, scream out thing. But, my classes, we scream. We scream for about a minute. It's an hour-long class. And somehow my classes have now been coined the screaming classes. So it is a powerful, sometimes controversial aspect of the work that I do. People are turned off by it. It's too intense, too this. Okay, whatever. But as one of my amazing, dearest friends and teachers, sound healer, Lindsay Monell, taught me in my sound healing training that sound bowls, gongs, chimes, music, binaural beats, deeply healing frequencies, but the most healing frequency of all for your own body is the sound of your own voice. I'm going to back away from the microphone, but we'll release a little bit of sound together, a big sigh, a scream. We'll ground back in our own energy. I will cover my hands over my mouth so I don't blow your eardrums out, but we practice what we preach in here. So we'll take our first scream together. And moving forward, we'll start every episode this way, but I figured it would be the best way to usher us into this new chapter for me and you and us together. So just take a moment to bring your feet underneath your seat. Whether you're sitting on your couch, in your bed, your car, the subway, wherever you are. And we'll take 3 rounds of an inhale and exhale. And on the 3rd round, on the sigh, we'll let out a big sigh, a scream, a yell, whatever you need. But we'll start together. I'll guide us through. Feel free to take all the time you need. We'll take a deep inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. Another deep inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. Last round of breath here. So you take that big sigh, that scream, whatever you need. Deep inhale through the nose. We'll sigh or scream on the exhale out. Eyes still closed. Just focusing on how you feel in your body. Maybe that made you feel a little uncomfortable. Maybe it made you laugh. Maybe it released something. But hopefully, whatever it brought up, it brought you a little bit closer to you. If you want to get out of your head, you need to get into your body. And if you want to get into your body, you need to get into your breath. You need to be with your breath. That's the first episode of Breathe In, Scream Out. I did it. I am so excited for what's to come. I am so friggin' excited for some of the guests I have coming up. People that I thought it would take me years to get on the pod are some of my first guests, which is wild, which is crazy. And is part of like my own work I've been doing in what is possible, of thinking about the thing, believing it's possible, letting it go, and poof, it happens. It shows up. So let that be a little bit of inspiration for you for this Gemini season. If you have any questions, DM me. I will include some links in the show notes for a Gemini season playlist. Music is a huge part of my work, and it's how I get a lot of my creativity out. It's how I feel creative and design so much of the work that I do, so many of the classes that I offer. I love music. There'll be a podcast link, a link to my Instagram if you have personal questions. If something came up that you don't quite understand or weren't sure about. Sometimes when I'm in these states, I'm in flow or dropped in, and I can't quite remember what I said. So if you DM me personally, I will absolutely get back to you at the Katie Healy on Instagram. If you have questions about your personal chart, we can connect. And there are so many amazing astrologers that I am inspired by, that I love to learn from on social media, off social media, other podcasts, Chani Nicholas, Queer Cosmos, Colin Bedell, Virginia Rosenberg, Embodied Astrology, so many people that I love and have their own specialties in so many ways. And this podcast isn't going to just be about astrology. If you're looking for a deeper dive, a lot of them have so many amazing tools, offerings, knowledge to give you, as do I. But this podcast is a little bit more encompassing all the things, especially in these one-on-one conversations, interviews that I'll be having with folks. We won't just talk about the moon. We'll talk about what works for them, their journeys, their grief, what feeling everything means to them, and most importantly, what they're screaming about. Thank you for tuning in. This is one of my favorite things to do, is talk, connect, and share. Hello, Sag Sun, Gemini rising. So I'll leave it there. DM me, reach out. Thank you for listening. This is not possible without you, and I can't wait to scream with you again.